Hey everyone, welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers of happiness, joy, and a centered approach to success in life. Seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation, and we're so glad you're here. Let's dive in.
Well, Melissa, yesterday we met up with our Choreology crew.
Oh my gosh, that was so fun.
Right? So last week we talked about reunions and how we were looking forward to meeting up with the team. It was awesome. It was actually way better than I was even building it up in my head. It was so fun to see them.
I know. What I loved is how not even all of us were at the table and already the mud started slinging. It was like all the old energies, jokes, personality styles just reared their heads and boom, we were off to the races before we even ordered food.
I don't feel like, it's not like all of us in that group of people were like, maybe we are, I'm going to say it like we're super eccentric but everyone has like a very unique style of communication, and it just came right back. I was like, oh, right, this is how John talks. I forgot.
This is how Mary is.
Right.
I know. It was so fun. And how like John and Mary had like this natural cerebral connection all the time. Like they just did that again too.
Oh yeah, John and John. Two of our coworkers are running. John, so we got a job with John. The thing I thought was really fun and interesting about it is right away, like it was kind of like a quick like, what are you up to now? Kind of.
Yeah. Right.
But right away, we're right into talking about what made our relationships that team so special. What was it about the relationships that we quickly formed in those couple of years that made it feel so amazing?
I know.
And I love that this group of people, like, they don't care, like, we don't care about like the superficial updates of what's happening in your life or whatever. It's just like we're like right into some like deep topic, like why was this, what was the magic here?
Yeah. I know. I loved it.
So let's talk. You want to talk about that?
Well, I do.
Let's talk about like what makes a good relationship.
Yes, and funny you should mention it because I found a great article also that falls in line with the same topic. Perfect. You want to go first?
About what? What makes a good relationship? I don't know.
Wait, how much time do we have? Are we like putting this on pause and coming back then after we think about it? What are we doing here?
Well, okay. So some things we talked about with the team was, I think everyone talks about like, trust is a big thing with a relationship. And to me, that's like almost like a given. Like, I'm not going to get myself into a relationship where like trust isn't like a total baseline.
Yeah.
So I don't even like saying that trust is an important part of a relationship because to me, like, it's like a non-starter. The thing that I felt was like really amazing with our group and a thing that I really value is feeling accepted. It's like we all come with our own sort of weirdness and baggage and uniqueness, and I generally find like my best relationships are ones where I can be like authentically myself and I'm just accepted for who I am, and I don't have to pretend that I'm more extroverted than I actually am, or I'm less opinionated about something here or there than I actually am,
Well, and not only accepted, but supported for all of those things. Like that's a huge marker too, is feeling supported. Even if what you say or do, you may consider not mainstream, or you might think you're weird or whatever, whatever story we're telling ourselves in the moment, but really feeling supported by the team and someone else individually.
And another thing I find like really important in a relationship is like giving grace and like receiving grace. Like, like I screw up all the time. Like,
we all do.
You know what I mean?
We all do.
And so it's really valuable in a relationship where if, for someone to be like, hey, yeah, JJ, you kind of messed up there. It's cool. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Like, let's move on.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. I think, as we're talking about like these great relationships and just sort of, thinking about how do we cultivate that more in our lives. We had this wonderful team relation and individual relationships too. It's like not only were we good as a group, but one-on-one, we were there for each other, and there was such an affinity for each other individually, and I think like that's an interesting thing to focus on, is how do we cultivate deeper relationships. Some of them seem awfully easy,
Well,
but
yeah, I agree. Some of them do seem super easy, like they naturally fit.
Yeah, right.
And some of them take a little bit more work, or maybe even like a little bit more exploration around like what they should be. The other thing that I think about in a good relationship is like the kind of relationship. I think you and I've talked about this before, where it's like, I've got like friend relationships, partner relationships, spousal relationships, peer relationships, parent-child relationships, child-parent relationships, subordinate, or like, boss kind of like relationships. So like what the expectation of the kind of relationship you're in, I think is important too, because like I've shared, I've had some relationships where like I thought we were peers, but it was clearly more like a mentorship relationship. Now it's like I was a little confused by it for a while. So I realized like, oh wait, this isn't a peer relationship. I get it now. I get my role now. But when the roles are mismatched, right, it's a little bit problematic.
I think, one of the things, like, as we're talking, I think that there's a couple of, and I'm going to just reference a little of this article that I read because it's so on point to this discussion. One of the things that cultivating really strong relationship is recognizing that every single one of us have what they call two antennas. I love this idea because one of them is the antenna that receives signals from other people. The outside world, we're constantly getting these signals and we're trying to interpret with our antennas, right? Like, what is this person thinking? What does this person want? What is this,
like we're listening to what they're saying, but we're also watching their body language. We're watching kind of how they act around us and other people. And we're trying to like figure out the puzzle of the relationship.
And I think this particular antenna is where most people spend their time. And then there's a second antenna that this article references, and it's so interesting because it's the antenna that observes what's going on internally for us. And I think that one's harder I don't think that one is a natural give me. I think that's a harder one for people to recognize because first of all, I think it's super easy to get overwhelmed by all the information that's coming to us all the time through other people's relationships with us. I think it's really easy to get sidetracked and to just get so wrapped up in, responding to that person or responding to the moment in a way that you feel is expected. That a lot of times we're not checking in with our own internal antenna saying, wait a minute, how am I actually feeling about what is this interaction like? And the reason I think this is so important is, I think the thing with our choreology group that was so special is that we were in a professional environment doing professional things, but the relationships that we had were personal. And they didn't start off that way. So that's, to me, that is the ultimate question is how do people take this depth of building better relationships, and how do you take that not just into your personal life, but how do you bring that into your work life?
So what I just remembered, it's so funny how you and I can like talk and preach and share about all of these like self-awareness ideas.
Which we do.
But then we like easily slip on them all the time. Right? Because we're just human. Like, and but what just dawned on me was we're talking about this like this period of time where we had this group of people where we felt we had some like a really particularly amazing relationships with each other.
Yes. Yeah.
The other thing that we were doing during that time, if you remember, is we were working on a self-development, self-awareness tool.
Yes.
We were creating coaching content around the idea of self-awareness. We were all like meditating. Like we
Yes.
were all like doing
Yes.
research on mindfulness, meditation, being centered. We do you remember this? We even
Yes.
like had like a daily tracker of
Yes.
how long people meditated and
Yep.
what their streak was. You even had that crazy headset thing that
Yeah.
measured your
Muse.
brainwave activity.
It's not crazy. It's called Muse, and it still exists, and I still have mine. Thank you very much. By the way, for anybody who's curious, it's literally a headband that measures your brainwave activity, and it tells you when it moves up too high, you're not in a meditative state. It's very judgy for being meditational. It's a very judgy tool.
But think about what you just said about what makes a good relationship.
Yes.
It's this internal antenna. And then think about like the group norm that we were cultivating with that group of people, which was like a deep practice of mindfulness, understanding ourselves,
Precisely.
self-awareness. And we were very purposeful about it during that period of time. Fast forward to now, like I'm not nearly as purposeful about that now than I was then, right? Like why? Why did I stop doing all of that stuff? I don't know.
Well,
Got busy.
Yeah, we Okay, I want to just stop here though. Let's just put a pin in this spot right here because I really want this pod to be instructional, not just interesting. Because I feel like this is a cool thing we can all really easily take a couple of things from and bring into our ideas every day. Like, I really think that that's true. Like, because as I'm talking about this, like these two antennas, how does this make it a more meaningful thing? And it's like building a functional and meaningful relationship. What is required is having both of those antennas highly tuned. So not only what's going on the outside, but also what's likely to happen for you on the inside. Because if you're really mindful, as you're talking about your own processes, this affords you the opportunity to keep those antennas tuned really highly. And then by doing that, you can listen more closely and you're more aware of every interaction that's happening for you. I think this is just like, it's such common sense, but it's so interesting to think about. If you're not able to notice your feelings and how things are happening, the small movements in your heart and your mind and your soul, if you're not able to stay mindful of that, then you're spooling off and those relationships can stay more surface or more actor-ish, not as authentic. I just think that's fascinating.
Yeah, so just to state it, I guess again.
Yeah, too verbose.
What you're saying is, the one of the keys to getting a deeper, better relationship with people is actually to get to know yourself better and pay attention to yourself a lot more than you're paying attention to the external circumstances.
Yeah.
Which is, I think it's really hard to do. I mean, again, like there's been times where I have been trying to think about that, but my default is not to think that way.
Yeah, I know. Listen to this statement that was written in this article. Mindfulness is a way to keep those antennae, I don't know how you say it.
I think that's right.
Okay. Highly tuned. It tunes the external antenna to listen closely and to regard every interaction as an opportunity to learn rather than as a threat or a challenge. And it tunes the internal antenna to the small movements of mind, heart, and body that inform us how we are feeling. And the reason that that's important is because every feeling is just loaded with data. It gives us all kinds of facts, and it tells us what's important to us and what's not important to us, right? And the more that we are aware of that, it gives us more options in the interactions and the exchanges, rather than like hearing somebody and maybe getting defensive. Hearing someone and getting that feeling inside because that antenna says, "Ooh, something they just said triggered me somehow." It gives us a chance to respond in a different way intentionally because we're being very mindful.
Yeah. I think that's interesting, that idea that the external antenna, when someone else is talking, a lot of times that can be interpreted as a threat or a challenge.
100%. Yeah, I agree.
And thinking about that, it is actually kind of kind of interesting that a lot of times well-intentioned comments we take as
exactly
a challenge,
mm-hmm.
when they're
We have
really
strong
not. Like,
feeling.
again, this is sort of like some default thinking
Totally.
that if we can be more mindful about, we can probably navigate life a lot smoother.
Yeah. And to that end, feelings also help us de-escalate potential conflicts. So we always think like if we have a strong feeling that the feeling's not going to be good. But what if a strong feeling indicates, oh, hang on a minute, this is a potential conflict. This is like my warning signals going off, and I can de-escalate this by responding differently because I'm recognizing my antennas beeping.
How often have you been in a situation where maybe you've been in a highly I don't know, confrontational or a very tense conversation?
Yeah.
And you sharing how you're feeling is actually the thing that de-escalates it.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Often, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very useful technique.
Oh, I totally agree. Okay.
But it's hard to do because that means you're like, you know, in a lot of contexts, that means you have to be vulnerable. You have to be brave enough to share that.
Right. And it's so true. And exactly as you're saying, listen to this. So here's this big idea for me, exactly what you're saying right in this moment. Because so many of us have been socialized to suppress our feelings. So not only don't say them, but don't feel them, right? Especially in the business world.
Yep. Because
we've been socialized to suppress all that, we end up feeling less known. We end up feeling that other people they're going to tell our story because we just shut down. And then we don't feel as known. And then what happens? Then we don't have the connection. Then we feel threatened. Like then things can escalate higher because we may not have that trust and acceptance and support like you were talking about. Like that's the full circle. I just think this is a fascinating discussion as it relates specifically to building better relationships, and not just at home, but at work. Like I found that to be one of the biggest things, like even in just reflecting with our group from yesterday, that I felt seen. You know, I felt that group accepted me, and that group didn't care that I was a goofy, you know, highly whatever, opinionated, strong female, which at the time I thought was a bad thing. Now I kind of like it. Well, I usually like it, not always. But I felt seen, I felt loved, I felt supported. And that to me allowed me to have such strong relationships and build things with that team.
So how would you put this into like a more everyday, like cookies on the bottom shelf kind of practice? Because like, I agree with you. We could talk about this. We could talk about even some of our experiences of momentarily being in that headspace, and that kind of relationship with people. But I mean, admittedly, it's hard for me to stick there.
Yeah. Again, I think this is all pointing back to cultivating a practice of mindfulness, right? Like even being able to stop in the moment and like, for example, say something like, this triggers me and I really notice I'm feeling defensive about what you're saying or how you're saying it, or this idea that you think we should do. It's just triggering me. And I don't feel like I can respond because I feel defensive and I don't want to. Like even being able to just name something in the moment allows space. So like that's one idea I have, but what do you think?
Well, there's probably a couple like techniques that sometimes I'll use when I notice that I'm not going to be maybe in a good headspace to have a good conversation with somebody. And usually that my trigger on that is usually like when I'm short on time, when I'm feeling behind, when I'm, you know, and so someone will want to have a conversation with me about something. Could be terribly important, could be not, but I'll be like super short, right?
Right.
And so what I've been trying to do is like when before a meeting, I'll try to check in and be like, okay, how am I feeling? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Am I feeling behind? Am I feeling underprepared?
Yeah.
And if I am, I just say those things like, hey guys, I'm feeling really short on time right now.
Or I'm super hungry and I'm really crabby.
Or just
whatever.
Any of those things that if you can just take a minute, just a moment to check in with yourself before. And at work, it's really easy because, like literally put it on your calendar.
Yeah.
You can literally schedule yourself to be like, check in 1 minute thing on your calendar before, like the next event.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. You know what?
At home, it's harder.
Yeah. But right here, before you leave that topic, I was going to say, I went in for my annual physical, and the nurse told me that she has her Apple Watch set up. Now, whatever, take it for just an idea. She has her Apple Watch set up so that every hour it gives her a reminder to breathe for 1 minute. And I was like, wow, what has that done for you? And she said, it's been a game changer for me because I'm always doing 75 things at once. I always feel like I can't slow down. But when that dinger goes off, I say to myself, you know what? I can relax for 1 minute.
What a great technique. That's awesome.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I can relax for 1 minute.
Yeah.
So I think that was a good one. I have another idea that came to mind. I think another way, like to just be practical about this application that we're talking about, is to, in the moment, you can ask more questions of the person that you're in relation with. So like if they say something to you and you're feeling like not good, or you're feeling like you're having a strong reaction, or you feel defensive, or it's a feeling that you don't like, another thing you can do is just ask them more clarifying questions. Like, okay, hang on a minute, wait, stop. Can you just say that again? What did you just hear me say? Or can you tell me more about what you mean? Like, oh, I'm not sure I'm feeling that way. Can you expand on that more? Like asking them more general questions to talk more and to fill things in more. And I think it not only gives you a chance for a little more information for your antenna, but I think it also gives you a chance to settle yourself down some.
Yeah, I was going to say, sometimes in conversations, like taking a break or taking a pause is totally fine.
Yeah.
We feel this pressure that like, it's like, oh, we're involved in a conversation. We must like somehow get it all the way through to completion.
Yeah. Right.
But, saying like, hey, I'm getting pretty overwhelmed here. Can you just give me a little bit to think? And for some of us, for half of us introverts of the world need to think before we say the next thing.
Yeah.
So being just accepting of yourself to say, hey, I need some processing time before I can move on in this conversation. Yeah. It's totally fine.
And I will plus one what you just said and say that also applies to extroverts, because just because extroverts are talking more doesn't mean that they feel safer inside either at all. A lot of times they'll talk more just because they're trying to be the popular one or keep the conversation going because they feel personal responsibility to carry that load.
Actually, I would say in my observation, if someone who is extroverted is feeling extra uncomfortable or threatened or emotional, they talk more, which actually just digs a deeper hole sometimes.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So. Antennas can't work in holes. Well, not unless they're really, really, really long.
My other favorite one is setting your own expectation of something before you go into it. It's like, what do I expect out of this next interaction? Or can I be less expectant? Right? Because I think sometimes, because the higher we have expectation, the more we judge the outcome, which then creates defensiveness. And there's like a control thing in there too.
Totally,
like, I think I can control this conversation, but like, let go. You can't control it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, unless it's all by yourself, which then it's not a conversation.
Yep. Well, this is good stuff. It's we've talked about in the past. There's all sorts of like little self-awareness reminder things that you can do. The watch thing, an alarm, even like having something physical, like something on your wrist, something you fidget with that just reminds you that like, oh, this is the moment that I'm going to take a beat and check in with myself.
Yeah. And honestly, if we think about it in the work context too, if we want exceptional relationships in our lives, the things that need to be present in there, the trust, familiarity, acceptance, support, those have to be cultivated by both really being aware of what's happening on the outside, but then also having that antenna tuned inside to understand how we're responding to all of those things. And our feelings are just loaded with data. It's okay to go there, right? It's okay to go there. And I think that really helps us so that we can then speak to ourselves more authentically, speak of ourselves, or speak whatever, more authentically, for other people to know us better. And that's how those relationships become stronger.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it was fun seeing the crew. It's fun having this conversation about how to foster better relationships. And it's just a good reminder to do those small things.
Absolutely.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well. Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them.
We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring.